The UK government wants to send migrants to Rwanda. Here's why UK's Supreme Court says it's unlawful. Britain's Supreme Court dealt the government a huge blow. It ruled that Sunak's government's flagship policy to send migrants on a one-way trip to Rwanda is unlawful. The government is vowing to make some changes and press on with this controversial plan. Here's a look at the decision and what could happen next. Firstly, let's understand what is the Rwanda plan. Well, this is basically the British government's response to the growing number of migrants from around the world, about 46,000 in 2022, who crossed the English Channel from France to Britain in small boats. Most people who arrive that way apply for asylum, and in the past, many have been granted asylum. The Conservative government says these migrants should not be treated as genuine refugees because they did not claim asylum in another safe country, such as France, that they reached first, in fact. In an attempt to deter people from making this risky journey, the UK struck a deal with Rwanda in April 2022 to send migrants who arrive in the UK as stowaways or in boats to this East African country, where their asylum claims would be processed and, if successful, they would stay. Human rights groups and other critics of the plan say it is unworkable and unethical to send migrants to a country 4,000 miles away that they don't even want to live in. No one has yet been sent to Rwanda, as the plan has been challenged in the courts. Making the plan work has become a central pillar of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's pledge to stop the boats. The first planned deportation flight was blocked in June by a last-minute injunction from the European Court of Human Rights, or the ECHR, and the strategy's lawfulness was subsequently challenged by a judicial review at London's High Court. In one of his first major policy announcements, Rishi Sunak set out a strategy to clamp down on illegal immigration and said he wanted to restart the flights to Rwanda despite opposition from lawmakers in all the main political parties, also the United Nations and even King Charles. Supporters of the Rwanda deal say that sending migrants to the country will reduce overcrowding in processing centers and give genuine refugees a home. However, since policy has been announced, tens of thousands of people have continued to arrive in Britain. And until recently, Rwanda had only set up one hostel to accept UK refugees. This too with a capacity for about 100 people only, representing 0.35% of all the migrants who arrived in Britain on the small boats last year. Now let's try and understand, what did the UK Supreme Court say? The UK Supreme Court ruled that Rwanda is not a safe third country where migrants can be sent. 5 justices said unanimously that the removal of the claimants to Rwanda would expose them to a real risk of ill treatment because they could be sent back to their home countries they had fled. The judges said there was evidence Rwanda had a culture that misunderstood its obligations under the Refugee Convention, was dismissive towards asylum seekers from the Middle East and Afghanistan, and had little experience of the asylum procedures needed to handle the cases of migrants from around the world.
The legal test which has to be applied in this case is whether there are substantial grounds for believing that asylum seekers sent to Rwanda would be at real risk of refoulement. In the light of the evidence which I have summarized, the Court of Appeal concluded that there were such grounds. We are unanimously of the view that they were entitled to reach that conclusion. Indeed, having been taken through the evidence ourselves, we agree with their conclusion.
So the question arises, what was the UK government's response? Rishi Sunak said the government will soon seal a legally binding treaty with Rwanda that will address the court's concerns, partly by barring the country from sending any migrants deported from the UK back to their home countries. He also plans to pass legislation declaring Rwanda a safe country in UK law. If that fails to stop legal challenges, Sunak said he would consider ignoring or leaving international human rights treaties, including the European Convention of Human Rights. That move is backed by some members of Sunak's governing Conservative Party, but would draw strong domestic opposition and international criticism. The only European countries that are not party to the Rights Convention are Belarus and Russia. The Rwandan government insists that it is committed to its international obligations and has been recognized by the UN and other international institutions for, as they say, their exemplary treatment of refugees. Rwanda's government says the country is ready to receive migrants from Britain and has plans to build more than 1,000 houses, including recreational facilities for the deportees. But the question is, have other countries tried similar policies? While Britain is not alone in trying to control irregular migration, much of Europe and the US is struggling with how best to cope with migrants seeking refuge from war, violence, oppression, and a warming planet that has brought devastating droughts and floods. A few countries have tried offshore processing of asylum seekers, notably Australia, which has operated an asylum processing center on the Pacific island nation of Nauru since 2012. From 2013 to 2018, Israel had a deal with Rwanda to deport African migrants until Israel's Supreme Court declared it unlawful. Talks on a similar agreement between Denmark and Rwanda have not borne fruit. Experts believe there's no other evidence that this policy is working elsewhere, at least within the context of Europe. Italy recently reached a deal with Albania for the Balkan country to temporarily house and process some of the thousands of migrants who reach Italian shores. There is a crucial difference to the UK plan, though. It's not a one-way trip. Successful asylum seekers would get a new start of their lives in Italy, not Albania. Anyway, with the greatest supporter of the policy, the former Interior Minister Suella Braverman, now in attack mode, Rishi Sunak has a huge challenge in front of him. In fact, Suella Braverman had called the wave of arrivals an invasion and described many of the migrants as criminals. And now, after working with Sunak on the policy, she wrote a strongly worded letter to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, accusing him of having repeatedly failed to deliver on key policies.
And so we have been working on a new international treaty with Rwanda. This will provide a guarantee in law that those who are relocated from the UK to Rwanda will be protected against removal from Rwanda. And it will make clear that we will bring back anyone if ordered to do so by a court. So I'm also announcing today that we will take the extraordinary step of introducing emergency legislation. This will enable Parliament to confirm that with our new treaty, Rwanda is safe. It will ensure that people cannot further delay flights by bringing systemic challenges in our domestic courts and stop our policy being repeatedly blocked. But to fully solve this problem, the Rwanda policy is a necessary deterrent. That's why it's important that the Supreme Court has today confirmed that the principle of removing asylum seekers to a third safe country is lawful. Because it means that when we have addressed the Supreme Court's concerns, people will know that if they come here illegally, they will not get to stay, and so they will stop coming altogether. Recommendations: we will meet all those challenges with our new treaty, and then Parliament will have the chance to demonstrate unequivocally that Rwanda is safe for these purposes and in compliance with all our obligations. So not only have we made great progress this far, we will get the job done, and that involves the new treaty and new domestic legislation, and that will clear the remaining barriers to us getting flights off as planned in the spring of next year.
Do tell us what you think about this video in the comment section, and for more news updates, subscribe to India Today.